Good day everyone, bonjour tout le monde, and welcome to this new episode of BIA des Dodgers of Canada. While the Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment were fighting their epic battle at Asoro, a remarkably similar battle was taking place at nearby Leonforte. And once the Canadians will have captured Leonforte, they will pursue their advance toward Nisoria and eventually Agira. We are very fortunate today to have with us Dr. Angelo Plumeri, who will relate to us some of the major events of those epic battles.
Canadese l'inglese sicuramente era a valle.
And surely the Canadian and British artillery, they were behind the valley.
Leonforte è stato bombardato dall'artiglieria.
Before the assault, Leonforte was already bombed by the artillery.
Ci sono delle immagini di repertorio di questo.
We have some images of these.
The attack of Leonforte will start from the top of this ridge in front of us. As elements of 2 Brigade were getting ready to launch the advance. The first unit was the Seaforth Highlanders. They started the advance but were stopped below, in the valley in front of us. Afterwards, an artillery fire mission was ordered against the inhabited part of the town, because the Germans were positioned exactly in this area of the town. Subsequently, after the artillery bombing, the Loyal Edmonton Regiment was tasked to make a second attempt to capture the town. They managed to penetrate the town by doing a 2-company flanking assault, one on the right and on the other, the left.
Gli Edmonton attaccano frontalmente e lateralmente sul fianco sinistro.
The Edmonton, they attack front and sidewards on the left flank.
La compagnia D, che riesce ad entrare fino al centro abitato,
Company D, which manages to arrive, to go through the downtown,
ma insieme anche alla compagnia A e C, cioè tutte le compagnie riescono ad entrare nel
together
centro
with
abitato.
components of Company A and Company C.
E di fatto si crea una grande confusione tra i vicoli.
In the small streets, in the small alleys of the town, there's a big chaos.
Quando avviene il contrattacco tedesco durante la notte, che arrivano fin qua sotto,
When the German counterattack takes place during the night,
la maggior parte degli Edmonton che rimangono accerchiati insieme al loro comandante e più che altro la compagnia D. Ma
the
con tanti
majority, the most part of the Edmonton company is probably Company D, together with their commander.
Nel frattempo i genieri riescono a costruire il ponte Beli sul ponte Petrangelo.
Meanwhile, the engineers, they managed to build the Bailey Bridge on the old Petrangelo Bridge,
che era stato fatto saltare dai tedeschi.
which was destroyed by the Germans.
Ed è lì che poi viene mandato dal generale della brigata i PPSLI insieme agli Sherman, che riescono finalmente ad attraversare e fanno un'azione fulminea sbaragliando tutte le postazioni all'ingresso del...
And this is when the commander sends his Shermans to attack. They do a lightning attack and they manage to break through.
So Angelo gave us a good background on how the battle for Leonforte started. and how the Edmonton Regiment made their way to the town and were battling the Germans pretty hard. It was a fierce battle. Battalion headquarters was able to make its way to center of town in Piazza Margherita, where I'm standing right now, and they've ended up surrounded by the Germans from everywhere and lost communications with brigade headquarters. And as they lost communications with brigade headquarters, Chris Vokes thought that he had lost a good friend, because Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson was a good friend of him, and also that he had lost a fine battalion. So in the desperation, as the battle dragged on, a young kid made its way, about 10, 12 years old, made its way to the battalion headquarters, and Jefferson gave him a note to bring to the brigade. He says, to any Canadians, if you can find any Canadians, anybody outside the town, let them know we're still alive and we're waiting for reinforcement. And that kid miraculously made it to Chris Vokes' headquarters. And when Chris Vokes read that letter, he was so relieved to know that his friend was still alive and that his battalion was still fighting in the town of Leonforte. So we right away organized a quick column to come and rescue his unit. The column was formed out of the Three Rivers Regiment tanks and the Princess Patricia Canadian Light Infantry. The flying column started moving, but was stopped at the Bailey Bridge because of heavy mortar fire and machine gun fire. But Chris Vokes told them to resume and keep going at once. Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson recounts how happy he was when a tank of the Three Rivers Regiment knocked down a Panzer right in front of them as he was turning a corner. But there was still a lot of fighting to be done, and the town of Leonforte could not be declared secured until the nightfall. Private Cousins of the PPCLI should have merited himself a Victoria Cross for having knocked down 2 machine gun nests that were pinning down the whole company. But instead, he received a mention in dispatch posthumously. By the end of July 22nd, 1st Canadian Infantry Division had seized 2 major cities in the heart of Sicily and had inflicted major loss of troops, equipment, and strategic grounds to the German. They prevailed over first-class troops who had been ordered to hold their positions at all cost. This came at the cost of 275 casualties, and 2/3 of them came from 2 brigades. The remarkable success at Asoro and Leonforte had been a striking demonstration of Canadian capabilities, and General Montgomery was counting on them to bail him out of his self-inflicted jam in Catania. He issued orders to all formations of the 8th Army to go on the defensive mode, except for the Canadian Division. And now the dice were cast for what will prove to be the hardest battle to be fought by the Canadians in Sicily. I'm in Histoire right now with Angelo, Dr. Angelo Plumari, and Angelo is back with us and will tell us the story, the battle for Agira.
We find ourselves at Niceria, at the east exit for Niceria, where the 1st Brigade was tasked with the advance to capture the city of Agira. In front of us is the ridge of the hill that the Canadians were facing. We have the mountain of Niceria to the north, and then the State Road 121 in the center, with the road repair house that is found exactly on the crest in front of us. And then the other plateau to the south, where the Germans had constructed their defensive line. Notwithstanding the artillery fire that was aimed all along this line,
su tutta questa linea, e anche l'attacco che è avvenuto da parte dei carri armati del reggimento,
and even the tank attack undertaken by the Three Rivers Regiment,
che hanno
which occurred on this part of the road right in front of us,
strada, sono stati bloccati
was blocked when the lead tank was hit. This caused the halt of all the following column of tanks. After a furious battle, and after being able to neutralize several of the German 88mm anti-tank guns, they were able to withdraw. In fact, the tanks found themselves in an area that was extremely difficult for armor to operate. Therefore, the task now fell to the infantry. The infantry attacked 3 times. However, they unfortunately only sent 1 battalion at a time. And this fact was the reason for the failure of the attack on the defensive line that was christened Lion by the Canadians. At this point, General Simmons withdraws the 1st Brigade and replaces it with the 2nd Brigade to take up the attack.
Noi siamo esattamente tra la
We are now
linea, la
exactly
prima linea
halfway between
difensiva
the line
Lion,
defensive line
che
that we see
vediamo
here in front of
qui di
us.
fronte, tutto questo altipiano,
All this high ground east of the
alla
Nissoria mountain.
montagna di Nissoria. E qui vi erano posizionati tutte le
Here we
sia la
find all the
fanteria
German infantry,
tedesca, sostenuta da
supported by Italian
fanteria
infantry,
italiana,
and covered
con
by
il-
both the German
la
and Italian
copertura
artillery,
dell'artiglieria sia tedesca che italiana, e con la presenza di una compagnia di carri armati
along with a
Mark
company
III
of Mark
e
III and Mark IV
Panzer
Panzer
Mark
tanks.
3 e 4. E quindi riescono di fatto
Therefore, they were able to
specialmente
block
grazie
the
al
1st
loro
Brigade,
sistema incrociato
thanks to the system of intersecting fire from their LMG
che,
positions.
di fatto riusciranno a bloccare, come abbiamo detto, la prima brigata. E poi ci troviamo invece verso est.
Here we are now facing east,
Vediamo la linea, la seconda
where we can
linea
see the 2nd
difensiva,
defensive
che è
line
quella,
that the Canadians christened
battezzata
Tiger,
dai canadesi come la linea Tiger, che è qui,
right here in
proprio di
front of
fronte
us.
a noi. E in fondo
And in the
vediamo
distance,
la montagna di Agira,
we can see the mountain of Agira
con la sua forma
with its characteristic
caratteristica,
form,
e le colline
and the
che
hills
stanno
that are in
proprio
front of the
davanti
mountain,
all'abitato di Agira, sono quelle che
which formed the
costituiranno
3rd
la terza
defensive line
linea
that the
difensiva,
Canadians christened Grizzly.
battezzata dai canadesi come la linea Grizzly. Ecco, qui proprio su questo terreno si sono
So here,
combattuti,
on this very spot,
aspramente,
the soldiers fought
ferocamente,
desperately and ferociously
i soldati, durante questa
during the
battaglia
Battle of
per la
Agira.
conquista di Agira. Chiaramente i difensori sono stati favoriti da
Clearly,
un
the
tipo di
defenders had the
territorio.
advantage.
Noi possiamo
Thanks to
vedere,
the terrain,
abbiamo diverse
we have hills, high
altipiani,
pastures,
colline,
valleys,
vallate,
and all of
e
these
tutto
heavily
questo
favored the
chiaramente ha
defenders.
favorito maggiormente i difensori. Il secondo attacco
The second
che il
attack that General Simmons launched
mette in
was
atto
preceded by
lo
an
fa
overwhelmingly massive
prima di
artillery
tutto con
barrage
una massiccia azione di artiglieria
never
che non ha avuto
before seen to that
precedenti
point in the
da parte
action,
canadese, mettendo in campo tutta
which
l'artiglieria a
engaged
sua
all
disposizione,
available Canadian
sia
artillery
canadese che
units,
quella
along with
britannica
British
messa a
guns from the
disposizione
8th Army Corps.
dal
After
corpo
this
d'armata.
extremely heavy bombardment, this
Dopo
time the
questo
infantry was sent in
pesantissimo
immediately following the end of the
bombardamento da parte
barrage.
dell'artiglieria, questa volta la fanteria viene mandata subito all'attacco. Siamo
It
al
is now
giorno
daytime on
27
27
luglio,
July.
e proprio questo attacco
And
in
so the simultaneous
contemporanea
attack
dei
by the
tre
3
battaglioni
battalions of the 2nd
della
Brigade
seconda brigata, che
allowed the
attaccheranno in
capture of all the
contemporanea,
land we see here,
riescono a conquistare
but
sia
only
tutto
after a
questo
ferocious
altipiano
combat
che noi vediamo qui, e dopo feroci combattimenti riescono a far arretrare
were they able to push the Germans and Italians back to the Tiger line?
Sulla linea che appunto ormai chiameremo Tiger.
Tiger is captured. Today we see this beautiful panoramic view, unfortunately ruined by the excavations, but still pretty because of the presence of the wooded area that surrounds it.
Proprio la conquista di questa collina che prende il nome di Baciante, proprio la conquista di questa collina dà la
But the capture of this hill, called Iachanti,
di respingere e poter far
gave the Canadians the opportunity to push forward and allow their Sherman tanks to climb the hill, which allowed them to take potshots at the German tanks and cause the retreat of the defenders back to Grizzly.
Verso la linea Grizzly da parte dei difensori.
I'm just gonna add my 2 cents here in these descriptions. Expecting the infantry to keep up with a rolling barrage or the artillery moving forward in this type of terrain, being an infantry soldier myself, I can't see how possible it can be because there's too much, the ground is going up and down and rocks and trees and tons of obstacles that the infantry has to go around just trying to keep up. Even if the artillery is not moving very fast, I mean, we're on foot, around all those obstacles and going up and down gullies and up mountains. You can't keep up with the artillery. All right, so we were at Lion with Angelo, and you saw all the view and the terrain. Then we went to Tiger, and we saw the terrain again, what it looked like. Now we have the last line of advance toward Agira, which was the line Grizzly. And the line Grizzly, from where we are right now, you're gonna see in a few minutes, really shortly, the view is spectacular of the city of Agira.
Ci troviamo sulla collina di Fronte, Monte Fronte.
We find ourselves on the hill called Monte Fronte, one of the 3 hills that made up the 3rd defensive line, Grizzly, the last defensive line before the capture of Agira. So we have this hill, and then in succession towards the north, there's Monte Cimitero, and right after is the hill of Monte Crapuzza. So these hills found to the west of Agira made up the last defense held by the Germans and Italians, reinforced by a battalion of the 29th Panzer Grenadiers from Nicosia, as well as a battalion from the Italian Aosta Division, to reinforce what remained of the 104th Panzer Grenadier Regiment of Colonel Enns. They received the order to hold at all costs, right here on Monte Cimitero, and on the hill where we are standing were the sites of the last and most vicious battles. The Seaforths attacked from the south to take the hill of Fronte. They scaled the rocky ridge,
roccioso che ci sta a sud di questa collina, che è un altopiano,
and Bell Irving succeeded in having his men climb and take up positions during the night of 27-28 July, and successfully pushed the Germans back, but only a little bit.
Su questa collina, che però si spostano solo di poco. La mattina, verso le ore 6, riescono a
The next morning at 0600, another attack was launched to push the Germans off the hill. But it was at the cost of another very bloody battle. At the same time, the Loyal Edmonton Regiment launched their attack on Monte Cimitero. They fought among the tombstones where the Germans had taken positions. And after a brutal hand-to-hand combat, the Loyal Eddies succeeded in pushing them off the hill. But this happened at a very high cost. There were a lot of dead and casualties on both sides. How did the Battle of Agira end? General Simmons had to finish the game, wanted to order an artillery fire mission on the inhabited center of Agira. The forward observation officer, Fu, that was sent to a position to observe and direct the fire. When he got to the outskirts of Agira, he was approached and advised by the townspeople that the Germans had already withdrawn from the inhabited areas of the lower town. They had withdrawn towards the north, toward Galliano, the town we see in the distance, and towards Troiano, which is in the American sector, and the others withdrew towards Regalbuto. The Fu reported to Division HQ that the civilians had told him that the Germans had withdrawn. Therefore, the PPCLI, along with a few Shermans from the Three Rivers Regiment, were ordered to enter Agira. They found that the lower town was clear of the enemy. The higher town, this conical top, still had a small rear guard that slowly, during the afternoon of 28 July, was mopped up, and so the entire inhabited area was cleared. So after 4 days of bitter fighting came the end of the Battle of Agira.
Heard the pipes of the seaforths of Canada. For the first time in the present war, the traditional ceremony of retreat was carried out by Canadian troops in an occupied town. And it won't be long until the same mad music of the pipes is heard in many another town in a Europe freed of a Nazi tyranny.
It is very incredible, like Angelo just said, about the way that the city was spared from bombardment because of this forward observer. That saved the city and also avoided many civilian casualties at the same time. Incroyable. And we're extremely happy to see it's been preserved, because when you look at this, it's like it's incredibly beautiful. Right. Thank you, Angelo. You're like wonderful, my friend. We're really glad to have him aboard. All right. As Angelo described so well, the fight to capture Agira was both ferocious and bloody. The Germans and the Italians defending the area had skillfully employed the terrain that was favorable for defense and took advantage of the questionable Canadian change of tactics. As the Canadians were facing a most determined enemy who had received the order to hold their position at all cost, and were willing to fight to the last man. After 5 days of battle, the 1st Canadian Infantry Division and the 1st Armored Brigade had suffered 438 casualties. In our next episode, we will continue the advance toward Regalbuto and Adrano, and we will relate the exploits of the 3rd Brigade for the capture of Catena Nuova. For BIE the Dodgers of Canada, this is Roger. Thanks for watching. Till next time, Custos Memoria.